Parents put me up for adoption because I wasn't a girl. My folks, Jim and Sue, put me up for adoption when I was just a kid, all because I was born a boy. Now, 2 decades later, they reached out, asking for cash to pay for my sister's college. I'm a 25-year-old man now, but my story starts way back when I was just 6. Actually, from when I was born. I'm the youngest of 3 kids. My parents weren't VDJ rich, but they had enough to raise 3 children. We lived in a small town, in an old family house that saved us a lot on expenses. My grandparents owned a farm that provided most of our food. Dad was a truck driver, away for days at a time, and Mom worked as a waitress. My parents already had 2 daughters when they had me. I was the surprise they didn't plan for. You know how parents feel about an unplanned kid. I didn't know this back then, but as I grew older I started picking up on these things. It was tough to realize I was unwanted. My parents wanted to get rid of me, but the doctor warned against it because it might harm my mom. My folks, especially my mom, wanted a girl. She had a simple reason. She wanted to reuse my sister's old clothes so she wouldn't have to buy new ones. My 2 older sisters were close in age, so they could share clothes easily. It was fun for them. But when I was born a boy, my parents were disappointed. They hated my guts. They dressed me in girls' clothes and sent me to school in my sister's old uniforms. It was humiliating as a kid. Though I was very young, I still remember being bullied for wearing a girl VD/TM's uniform and having long hair. If I complained, my mom would thrash me. I grew up with nothing but harsh words and abuse from my parents. I didn't understand most of it then, but when I did, I hated them. Dad was a bit better than Mom, but he was away most of the time and was unpredictable. Some days he seemed neutral, and other days he was just as bad as Mom, if not worse. I wanted to pretend I was an angel as a kid. I started to rebel once I realized how unfairly I was treated compared to my sisters. They always got the best of everything, and I got their leftovers. So I started acting out because as a kid I blamed them for my misery. Yes, I got punished for my actions, sometimes severely. I had to make my own breakfast and was often left without dinner. Imagine the cries of a 6-year-old going through this. There was one event I remember clearly, and it was a turning point in my life. I was bullied badly in the playground for dressing like a girl. When I got home, I found that Mom had bought new clothes for my sisters for the holidays. In a fit of rage, I took scissors and cut them into pieces. I know it was wrong, and I'm not proud of it, but I was 6, dealing with the pain my parents caused me. It was NVJTMT out of evil, but from hurt. Instead of understanding my pain, my parents saw it as a sin deserving the harshest punishment. They decided to put me up for adoption. They waited for a month, but no one wanted me. Their anger was then unleashed on me. I was constantly reminded of how worthless I was and that nobody wanted me. I even heard my mom say she wished she had checked my gender before birth so she wouldn't be JTMT have brought me into the world. It BDJ attempts haunting to know my parents hated me for something beyond my control. After some time passed with no luck finding someone to adopt me, my parents started talking about it with their friends and relatives. My dad knew a couple in the next town over, Tom and Liz, who ran a food truck. They were poorer than us but wanted a child badly. They were in their late 30s and had been trying for a kid for over a decade without any luck. Dad spoke to them, and they were quick to agree to take me in. I remember the moment Dad told Mom and my sisters about it. They were overjoyed to be rid of me. Dad did mention that Tom and Liz were poor and that I might not even be able to go to school. Mom rolled her eyes and said, "Who cares? Just drop him off there tomorrow." I stood there numb and scared, holding the curtain. No matter how much I hated my family, leaving them was terrifying. I had tears in my eyes but didn't cry out loud. They were so happy about it that they didn't even notice me. When Dad saw my tears, he came over, rubbed my back and said, "Pack your stuff. We'll leave tomorrow morning for your new family." I cried loudly, but it didn't matter. It was like no one heard me. So I went to my room, packed my things, and prayed my new family would be kinder. The next day, Dad drove me to the next town. I can't recall all the emotions I felt, but I remember not crying. Maybe I was just numb. My new family was indeed poor. They had a tiny house with only one room. They turned the old storage room into my bedroom. I didn't mind. They at least tried to give me a space of my own, something I never had. At home, my sisters had a bed, and I slept on a cot in the corner of their room with a tiny closet for my stuff. This new room was smaller, but it felt cozy. Tom and Liz were warm and loving. But coming from a messed-up home, I didn't know how to handle love. I saw my parents shower love on my sisters, but never on me. I doubted Tom and Liz's intentions and thought their love was temporary. I was afraid they might throw me out too. You know, childhood trauma sticks. It took months for me to realize they truly cared for me and weren't VDJ pretending. My school year got interrupted because I moved in the middle of the session, but Tom and Liz promised IVJTM go to school next year. I saw how hard they worked to save money for my schooling. That VDJTMs when I started to love them back. My adoption turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My biological parents never showed up after leaving me with Tom and Liz. Honestly, I was relieved because Tom and Liz treated me like a boy, not some mistake. They were hard-working folks, working 14 to 16 hours a day for their food truck. The truck was right outside their apartment, so I was never left alone. I could see them from my bedroom window. Eventually, I started spending my days on the truck, helping out. When I finally got into school, I focused on my studies but still helped with the truck when I could. I was about 10 when I started helping Tom with the cash register. I was good at math and learned business basics early on. After high school, I wanted to run the food truck full-time, but Tom and Liz insisted I finish college first. They used their savings to fund my education. They were getting too old to run the truck, and I wanted to take care of them like they took care of me. But they encouraged me to pursue college, promising they could manage for a few more years. I studied business and accounting because I wanted to become an entrepreneur. My graduation day was the happiest day of my life. Tom and Liz were over the moon. They even invited my biological parents to the ceremony, but they didn't show up. After college, I wanted to take over the food truck and let Tom and Liz retire, but they had different plans. They had saved up a decent amount and handed it to me. I was overwhelmed by their generosity. They said they could get by for a few more years, but they didn't want me tied down to the truck. They gave me the money to start my own business. I didn't want to waste their money, so I used my business knowledge to find a struggling local eatery at a good location. I pitched a profit-sharing deal to the owner. After a few rejections, I found one who agreed. I renovated the place and updated the menu to attract millennials and Gen Z, offering top-notch service. Within a year, sales skyrocketed and I made double the initial investment. 4 years later, I now own 3 successful cafes in town. I moved Tom and Liz to a better apartment and got a small place of my own. I had lived with them until then. I asked them to retire from the food truck, but they wanted to keep it for their happiness. Leaving their house with my suitcase, I never imagined I'd end up a college graduate, let alone running a chain of restaurants. Fast forward to last month. It was just another regular day at work. I was busy at the cash counter of one of my cafes when I spotted a familiar face. I felt like I had seen a ghost. It was my biological father, Paul. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 decades. He looked frail and old. He walked up to the counter with a wide smile and hugged me. There were customers around, so I didn't make a scene and took him to a corner. Seeing his face brought back all the painful memories of my childhood. I wouldn't have been able to recount such details about my past if they hadn't resurfaced in my life. Paul said he was so happy and proud to see me doing well. I stood there, numb and speechless. He mentioned he was just passing by and had met Tom, who told him about my success. Paul said he would bring my mom, Linda, to visit me over the weekend. I didn't say anything, and he left shortly after. After closing up for the day, I went to Tom and told him I didn't want to meet my biological parents, who had abandoned me just for being a boy. Tom and Liz knew about my troubled past. I wanted to run away and hide that weekend, but Liz insisted I meet them and try to forgive. Reluctantly, I agreed on the condition that Tom and Liz would be there with me. So that weekend, my biological parents arrived at Tom's house. I thought they might apologize, but they showed no remorse. Instead, they started listing the so-called favors they had done for me. Linda said I should be grateful they found such good parents for me who raised me to be successful. I was stunned. I wanted to lash out, but Liz squeezed my hand, signaling me to stay calm. I diplomatically said I was blessed to have Tom and Liz as my parents. The whole meeting was awkward for me. The next day, my mother called me. I didn't recognize her voice at first. After all, it was the first time she had called me in 20 years. She was asking for money. She said Paul had lost his regular job and had been working contract jobs for years. Linda had also lost her job because no restaurant wanted a 50-year-old waitress. They were struggling to make ends meet. I asked how much she needed, and she said $20,000 would be enough. She had borrowed money from friends to buy groceries and now needed to pay them back. I told her I would think about it and get back to her. Even though I hated them, I felt bad that people were hounding them for money. Sometimes I thought Linda was just trying to exploit me. But what if they genuinely needed help? I'd feel guilty if I let them suffer when I could help. Thanks for all the comments and support. I got mixed reactions about helping out my mom with the $20,000. I discussed it with Tom and Liz. Liz was happy I was considering it, but warned me to be careful. Tom said it was my decision, but shared my concern that they might be trying to exploit my emotions. After a lot of thinking, I decided to take a chance and transferred the money to her account. I felt good helping out, even though they had treated me so poorly. But I was wrong. Or maybe I should say I was right to be cautious. A week after sending the money, Linda called again. I had mixed feelings when I answered. She thanked me and then said, "Your sisters want to meet you. When can you come?" At that moment, I felt like maybe my family wanted to reconnect. I hated my parents for what they did, but I never really hated my sisters. Maybe as a kid I had done some mean things to them, but as I grew up, I didn't blame them. It wasn't their fault. Sometimes I even thought my parents got rid of me because they were poor, not because they were evil. I told Linda we could meet the following Sunday and that IDOWorkHereLady drive to their place. She interrupted, saying, "Why don't we meet somewhere else?" I didn't think much about it and agreed. She said she'd text me the details. After hanging up, I felt uneasy. Why did she want me to visit their home? It shouldn't matter where we meet, but meeting family after so many years, think they've want to invite me home. Still, I did dwell on it too much. Linda texted the details of a fancy restaurant in town. I went to the restaurant and they were already there. My sisters rushed to hug me. For a moment I was happy to see them after so many years. We caught up until the menu came. They started ordering the most expensive dishes. When they asked Paul what he wanted, he grinned and said, "Order the priciest one. My son is a big man now." Had Tom or Liz said that, I'd have laughed, but coming from him it felt different. It was petty and opportunistic. I would have been a proud son if they hadn't treated me so cruelly. I would have been a proud son. But coming from my biological parents, this was mean and wicked. There was nothing I could do. I sat there, watching them gorge on the food, plundering my wallet. Yes, I paid the bill too. Wild thoughts ran through my mind like ghosting them before the bill, but that would have been too harsh. I pledged right there never to get into their emotional trap again. I was cold for the rest of the evening, and I bet they didn't even notice. While leaving, they didn't invite me home either. Instead, my elder sister Tina asked, "So, where are we dining next?" I faked a smile and said, "Nowhere," and waved them goodbye. I went back and told Liz about my greedy family. She was shocked and found it all very disturbing. Liz is a kind and independent woman, and she couldn't believe how shameless my biological parents were. She advised me not to be a fool again and not to dwell on them. I took her advice to heart. My sisters called me after a week or so, but I didn't diddlemty respond. My mother also called, but I ignored her too. VJTM's been 2 months since then, and they have stopped texting or calling. I think they got the hint that I didn't want them in my life. Update 2. Hello everyone, thanks for all the support. As I mentioned in my last post, I stopped responding to my sisters and my biological parents because I understood they only wanted my money. Almost 5 months later, she called again. I saw the phone ringing, and without thinking, I answered. She began with small talk, asking about me and my work. It sounded so fake and pretentious that I couldn't bear it. I asked her what she wanted. She took a deep breath and said my sisters had to drop out of college because Paul couldn't pay their tuition fees. They wanted me to fund their education. I flipped out. She asked me to calm down and said they were my sisters, my family, and I should help them. I was at work and did want to mess up my head, so I hung up. She called again in the evening. I ignored the call a few times, but it was bothering me. Ignoring was the solution, I realized. The next time she called, I answered. She asked, "Your sisters are very excited to rejoin college, so how are we going to do this? Will you pay all at once or semester-wise? I suggest you transfer the whole amount to me, and IVJTM will handle the tuition each semester. You don't need to worry about the trouble." I was like, "Whoa, hold on, lady. IVJTM am not making any payments." She was so surprised. She didn't expect no to be an answer. She asked, "What do you mean? You don't want to pay it all at once? Tem's fine. We can manage installments as well." I repeated, "I don't want to pay it in any way. My elder sister VDJJTM's education is not my responsibility, especially when my parents abandoned me and never checked up on me. Even now, UVJTM are talking to me just to leech off my money." She was boiling with anger and lost her mind at my words. She said, "Don VJTMT, you forget that we birthed you. Whatever you are, it's because of us. Your dad found a good guardian for you, and now when it VVJTM's your time to repay us, you cannot shy away from your responsibilities. Your sisters and your parents are your responsibilities, and you have to take care of all of us." I had a lot to say, but it was just falling on deaf narcissistic ears. So I just said, "Well, yes, I do owe a lot to my parents, Tom and Liz. They deserve all the credit for my success. And for you guys, I don't know who you are. None of my documents have your names, nor do I have any photographs with you folks. So I don't think I know you all." She was hurling abuses at me, but I said, "Wrong number, lady," and hung up. Now, whatever you call me, selfish, cruel, or whatever, I'm not going to shower my hard-earned money on my so-called family. They were never my family. They got rid of me when I was just 6. And yes, I got comments in my last updates that I call Tom and Liz by their names and not Mom and Dad. Actually, I do call them Mom and Dad. Not immediately after coming to them, but when they got me to school, worked hard to provide for my needs, and loved me, I got attached to them and called them Mom and Dad. For the sake of narrating the story here, I referred to them by their names. Tom and Liz are my actual mom and dad. As for my biological parents, I don't call them anything. They don't exist for me. I stopped responding to their calls and texts, focusing on my life and my business. But almost 5 months later, out of the blue, she called again. It was my biological mother, Linda. I didn't expect much, but I picked up. She started with the usual fake pleasantries, asking how I was and about my work. It all sounded so forced and pretentious. I couldn't stand it anymore and cut straight to the point. "What do you want, Linda?" She sighed deeply and then dropped the bomb. "Your sisters had to drop out of college because Paul can't pay their tuition. We need you to fund their education." I was furious. She asked me to calm down, saying they were my family and I should help them. I was at work and didn't want to lose my cool, so I hung up on her. Later that evening, she called again. I ignored her calls a few times, but it kept bothering me. I knew ignoring wasn't the answer. The next time she called, I answered. She asked, "Your sisters are excited to rejoin college. How are we going to handle this? Will you pay the full amount at once, or should we do it semester by semester? I suggest you transfer the whole amount to me and IDOWTML handle the tuition each semester." I couldn't believe her nerve. "Whoa, hold on, lady, I'm not paying anything." She was shocked. She didn't expect me to say no. She tried to negotiate. "What do you mean? You don't want to pay it all at once? It's fine, we can manage in installments." I repeated firmly, "I don't want to pay in any way." I told her, "My sister's education is not my responsibility, especially after you abandoned me. You've only talking to me now because you need my money." Linda was furious and started yelling, "Don't forget we birthed you. Whatever you are today is because of us. Your dad found you a good guardian, and now when it's time to repay us, you can't shy away from your responsibilities. Your sisters and your parents are your responsibility. You have to take care of us." I had so much to say, but it was pointless. She wouldn't listen. So I said, "I owe everything to my parents, Tom and Liz. They are the ones who deserve credit for my success. As for you, I don't know who you are. None of my documents have your names, nor do I have any photos with you. So as far as IVGJTM concerned, I don't know you." She started hurling abuses, but I just said, "Wrong number, lady," and hung up. You can call me selfish, cruel, or whatever, but I'm not spending my hard-earned money on people who were never my family. They got rid of me when I was just 6. And yes, I got comments in my last updates about calling Tom and Liz by their names instead of Mom and Dad. Truth is, I do call them Mom and Dad now. Not right away, but after they got me into school, worked hard to provide for me, and showed me real love, I started calling them Mom and Dad. For the sake of telling this story, I used their names. Tom and Liz are my true parents. As for my biological parents, they don't exist to me. Now, on to another chapter in my life, which involves my wife, Maggie. We got hitched about 5 years ago. From the start, we hit it off real good. We both loved all things nerdy, gaming, anime, you name it. Maggie was my world, and I always thought things were great between us. We fell in love fast, meeting at a convention 3 years before we tied the knot. We had this really geeky wedding where folks even dressed up in costumes. But life's funny sometimes. What you think is perfect can crumble real quick. I wanted to make our 5th anniversary special. Even though I didn't make a ton of money, I managed to save up enough to surprise her with tickets to the biggest Comic-Con around. She was thrilled, and I was excited too. But let me tell you, I was always terrible at picking up signals from women. Even with Maggie, it took a few long chats on Discord before I realized she was into me. At the convention, everything seemed fine at first. I dressed up as a stormtrooper, and Maggie was Princess Leia. A gal dressed as Slave Leia kept flirting with me, but I didn't even notice until Maggie pulled me aside, fuming. She accused me of flirting back, but I was clueless. That was our first fight of the weekend. The next day, Maggie woke up feeling sick and exhausted. She told me to go ahead without her. I was worried, but decided to go and bring back something nice for her. I couldn't shake the feeling from the day before, though. When I returned, I heard strange noises from our room, moans. I walked in, and Maggie was there, looking guilty. She swore nothing happened, but something felt off. Maggie started working longer hours, claiming she was busy with work. One night I noticed her Discord notifications were turned off, something she never did. My gut told me something was wrong. I checked her phone, surprised the passcode was the same. The messages confirmed my fears. She was chatting with a guy she met at the convention, Rick. They exchanged flirty messages and photos. I was furious but kept it to myself for a while, planning my next move. I pretended everything was fine and even suggested she go to another convention alone to give me some space. She seemed too eager to go without me. On the day of the convention, I followed her. Rick was there, and they were all over each other. I watched from a distance, feeling my blood boil. When they got in line to meet a celebrity, I stepped in. I walked up to them, pulled off my mask, and faced Maggie. She looked shocked. "What are you doing here?" she stammered. I called her out right there, saying she cheated on me with Rick. She denied it, but I had the Discord messages printed out. The crowd around us watched, stunned. I told everyone how my wife, Maggie, was a cheater. The celebrity left, saying he needed a break. Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. We got back home and I packed my things. I stayed at a hotel and contacted a lawyer. Maggie tried to convince me to stay, suggesting an open relationship. She even said I could sleep with other women while she did the same with men. I wanted no part of that. She was supposed to be my player too, my everything. My actions got a lot of attention. Someone recorded the scene at the convention, and it went viral on social media. People were talking about it on Twitter and everywhere. Maggie DDTM's boss found out too. I have no idea what happened to her after that, and frankly, I don't care. I went ahead with the divorce, got the house, and sold it because I didn't want any reminders of her. My search for love continues, but it sure as hell won't be with a cheating woman like Maggie. After the dust settled from the divorce, I focused on rebuilding my life. Running my cafes kept me busy and distracted from the mess Maggie left behind. I had my fair share of trust issues now, thanks to her, but I wasn't going to let that ruin my chances of finding happiness again. One day, while working at one of my cafes, a new employee named Sarah caught my eye. She was hardworking, cheerful, and had this positive energy that was contagious. I tried to keep things professional, but I found myself drawn to her. She seemed genuinely kind, nothing like Maggie. We started talking more during breaks, and I learned that she was also a big fan of anime and video games. It felt like I was getting a second chance at finding someone who shared my interests. But I was cautious. I wasn't going to rush into anything like I did with Maggie. One evening, Sarah and I were closing up the cafe together. We were chatting about the latest anime releases when she suddenly asked, "Do you want to grab a drink after this?" I was taken aback, but agreed. We went to a nearby bar, and over a couple of beers we talked about everything from our favorite shows to our life goals. Sarah was different. She listened, laughed at my jokes, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. It was refreshing. But in the back of my mind, Maggie's betrayal still haunted me. I didn't want to fall into the same trap again. As the weeks passed, Sarah and I grew closer. She made it clear she liked me, but I was hesitant. One day she confronted me about it. "Why are you holding back, Jake?" she asked, looking me straight in the eyes. "I can tell you like me too, but something's stopping you." I sighed and told her everything about Maggie, the cheating, the lies, the betrayal. Sarah listened patiently, and when I finished, she said, "I'm not Maggie. I won't hurt you like she did." Her words were sincere, but trust was something I couldn't be told to give easily anymore. Still, I decided to give it a shot. We started dating, taking things slow. Sarah was understanding, never pushing me too far too fast. She even suggested we attend a small local anime convention together. It was a big step for me, considering how my last convention experience ended. At the convention, we had a blast. We dressed up, attended panels, and took tons of pictures. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. Sarah was patient and kind, slowly helping me rebuild my shattered trust. One night, after a long day at the cafe, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch of my small house, watching the stars. She turned to me and said, "Jake, I know you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here for the long haul. I'm not going anywhere." Her words hit me hard. It was what I needed to hear. I leaned in and kissed her, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally move on from Maggie's betrayal and build a future with someone who truly cared about me. But life, as always, had a way of throwing curveballs. Just as things were starting to look up, I got a call from an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered, only to hear Linda's voice on the other end. She sounded desperate and frantic. "Jake, it's your mother. We need to talk. It's urgent." I felt a chill run down my spine. After everything, I thought I was done with them. But now it seemed like they were pulling me back into their chaos. I didn't want to get involved, but something in her voice made me think twice. Maybe it was the last bit of guilt or a sense of duty, but I agreed to meet her. As I hung up, Sarah looked at me with concern. "Who was that?" she asked. I took a deep breath and told her it was Linda, my biological mother. She frowned but didn't say anything. She knew my history with them and understood why I was hesitant. "I have to see what she wants," I said, feeling a mix of anger and resignation. Sarah nodded and squeezed my hand. "I'll be here when you get back," she said softly. The next day, I drove to the meeting place Linda had suggested, a rundown diner on the outskirts of town. I walked in, feeling like a kid again, vulnerable and uncertain. Linda was already there, looking haggard and worn out. She saw me and waved me over. "Jake," she started, her voice trembling. "I know we've done you wrong, but we really need your help this time. Your father's in trouble. We don't know where else to turn." I sat there, listening to her plea, torn between wanting to walk away and feeling a sense of responsibility. I didn't owe them anything, but a part of me couldn't completely shut them out. Not yet. Sitting across from Linda in that dingy diner, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and pity. She looked like life had taken its toll on her. She started explaining, "Jake, your father, Paul, got mixed up with some bad people. He's in deep trouble with some debts, and they've Yuri threatening to harm him if we don't come up with the money." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "And why should I care? You abandoned me. You made it clear I wasn't VJTM part of your family." Linda JTM's eyes filled with tears. "I know, and I'm sorry. We were wrong, and I can VJTM to undo the past. But Paul is your father, and Hev JTM's in danger. We don't have anyone else to turn to." I felt a pang of guilt, despite my resolve to stay detached. The idea of leaving Paul to deal with this mess alone didn't sit right with me, even after everything. "How much money are we talking about?" 20,000, she said quietly. "We need it by the end of the month, or they'll hurt him." I sighed, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I didn't VJTM want to get dragged back into their chaos, but I also couldn't me to ignore their plea for help. "I'll think about it," I finally said, standing up to leave. "But don't VJTM expect anything." Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Jake, even considering it means more than you know." Driving back home, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't VJTM know what to do. I walked into the house and Sarah was waiting for me, her eyes full of concern. "How did it go?" she asked. I filled her in on everything. She listened patiently, and when I finished, she said, "Jake, I know they hurt you, but this is a chance to be the bigger person. You can help them without letting them back into your life fully." She was right, as always. But it was MVDJ an easy decision. I spent the next few days thinking it over, wrestling with my feelings. Finally, I decided to help, but with conditions. I called Linda and told her to meet me at a local bank. When she arrived, I laid out my terms. "I'll give you the money, but this is the last time. After this, I don't VJTM want any more contact. You handle your problems without involving me." Linda agreed, looking relieved. "Thank you, Jake. I promise we won't bother you again." I transferred the money and walked out of the bank, hoping VJTM made the right decision. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I was closing a chapter of my life that had been open for far too long. Back home, Sarah was waiting with a comforting smile. "You did the right thing, Jake. Now you can move forward without any regrets." Life started to settle into a new routine. Sarah and I continued to grow closer, and my business was thriving. I felt like I was finally moving past all the pain and betrayal. But just when I thought things were getting better, another curveball came my way. One evening, I received an anonymous letter. Inside was a photo of Sarah with a man I didn't VJTM recognize. They were close, too close for comfort. My heart sank as doubts and fears started creeping in. Was history repeating itself? Was Sarah betraying me like Maggie did? I confronted Sarah that night, showing her the photo. "What is this, Sarah? Who is this guy?" Her face turned pale, and she stammered, "Jake, it's not what it looks like. He's just a friend, an old friend from high school. We ran into each other recently, and that's it." I wanted to believe her, but the memories of Maggie's betrayal were too fresh. "I can't go through this again, Sarah. I need to know the truth." She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "Jake, I promise you there's nothing going on. I would never betray you." The doubt lingered, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "All right, Sarah, I believe you, but if I find out you VJs are lying, we're done." The tension between us was thick, but we tried to move past it. I hoped I wasn't making a mistake by trusting her. My past had taught me to be wary, but I didn't want it to ruin any chance of happiness I had left. The days following that confrontation with Sarah were tense. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but the scars from Maggie VDJTM's betrayal made it hard. I kept a close eye on things, hoping for reassurance that Sarah was different. One afternoon, while working at the cafe, I noticed a man lingering outside. He seemed familiar, and it suddenly clicked. He was the guy from the photo. My heart raced as I watched him walk in. He looked around and spotted Sarah. They exchanged a quick, awkward greeting. I decided to approach them, not wanting to jump to conclusions, but needing answers. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who's this?" She turned to me, eyes wide with surprise. "Jake, this is Ben, my old friend I told you about." Ben extended his hand, looking nervous. "Nice to meet you, Jake. Sarah VJTM's told me a lot about you." I shook his hand, trying to read his expression. "What brings you here, Ben?" "I was just passing by and thought IVJTM'd drop in," he replied, glancing at Sarah. "I didn't wish him to mean to cause any trouble." I nodded, still wary. "No trouble, just curious." Ben left shortly after, and I turned to Sarah. "I need you to be honest with me, Sarah. Is there anything going on between you two?" She looked me in the eyes, her expression earnest. "Jake, there's nothing going on, I promise. He's just an old friend." I wanted to believe her. The sincerity in her eyes gave me hope. "All right, Sarah. IVJTM'll trust you, but please, no more surprises." Days turned into weeks, and things seemed to settle down. Sarah and I grew closer again, and I started to let my guard down. One evening we were sitting on the porch enjoying a quiet moment together when she turned to me and said, "Jake, I know you've been hurt before, and I know at VDJTM's hard for you to trust. But I want you to know that IVDJTM here for you. IVJTM, not going anywhere." Her words felt like a balm on my wounded heart. I leaned in and kissed her, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't meant to felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally move on and build a future with someone who truly cared for me. As the months passed, Sarah and I continued to grow stronger together. We worked side by side at the cafe, shared our love for anime and gaming, and slowly but surely, I started to believe in love again. Sarah proved time and time again that she was different. She was patient, understanding, and genuinely cared about me. One sunny afternoon, as we were closing up the cafe, I took Sarah VJTM's hand. "Let VJTMs go for a walk," I said. We strolled down to the park, where the autumn leaves were just starting to fall. I stopped by the lake, turned to her, and took a deep breath. "Sarah, you've been my rock through all this. You've shown me what true love looks like. I know I've been cautious, but I'm ready now." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small box. "Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, unable to speak. I slipped the ring on her finger, and for the first time in a long while I felt complete. Sarah was my second chance, and I was, going to let my past ruin my future. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family. Tom and Liz were there, beaming with pride. I finally felt like I had the family I always dreamed of. My business thrived, and so did my relationship with Sarah. Looking back, I realized that life had thrown me many curveballs, but each one led me to where I was meant to be. Maggie's betrayal, my biological parents' abandonment, all of it shaped me into the man I had become. And now, with Sarah by my side, I knew I could face anything. As we started our new life together, I made a promise to myself to cherish every moment. The pain of the past was behind me, and the future looked brighter than ever. With Sarah, I found the love and trust I thought IDOWRKHereLady lost forever, and for that I was grateful.